If you Google the word body language, you will receive 97.5 million different responses. Think about it. There is so much information, and unfortunately, there is so much misinformation. Today, I'm going to explore 7 myths about body language that you can see everywhere on the internet. Do you want to stand out in your knowledge of body language? Then listen to this video because we're going to explore 7 common myths that you find all over the internet about body language that are totally wrong. If you're able to know these myths, you can correct some conversations and make yourself look like someone who actually knows what body language is all about. Stay tuned because at the end I want to offer you a free gift, which is an e-course on emotional intelligence, which will help you expand your emotional intelligence skills. Hello, my name is Irvine Nugent, and I've spent my career looking at this issue of body language and emotional intelligence. My doctoral thesis was on leaders in the time of crisis. And one of the things that I've become acutely aware of is the amount of misinformation around body language, leading people to make some rookie mistakes. I don't want that to happen to you. So today we're going to explore 7 of those most common myths. I remember very early in my career, I sat at a seminar, and the seminar was around becoming a better manager. And about 1 hour into the seminar, the presenter said, you know, when it comes to communication, 93% of communication is body language. Have you heard that? It's all over the place. In fact, it's still being repeated. The problem, of course, is this is totally false because it took a scientific study and it misinterpreted, and that misinterpretation has been repeated time and time again. The research was done by a gentleman called Albert Mehrabian. Dr. Mehrabian from UCLA was really interested in exploring, when it comes to emotionality, how much of our emotionality is represented in body language. And so he set up an experiment where people would say just one word around an emotional word, and he would measure on what percentage depended on the word and what percentage depended on aspects of body language and the voice. And what he found when it came to expressing one word, that indeed 93% was in body language. Now, people took that and they applied it to everything. And so people said, in any conversation that you have, 93% of that conversation is all about body language and just 7% on words. Now, that's just pure fiction. It's incorrect. And the reason that it's incorrect is just think, the next time you watch a movie, say a foreign movie, turn off the translation, the transcriptions, and just listen to the words that you don't understand. If this theory is true, you should be able to understand the movie because 93% is all about body language. And of course, that's incorrect. We need words in normal conversation. So you ask me, what percentage is body language? And I say that's a very difficult question to answer because it's almost impossible to measure. I think what we can say is that in any normal conversation, about 50% or so of communication depends on non-verbal messaging. I think that's safe to assume. The second body language myth that's just all over the place is that people that cross their hands are being defensive and they are blocking you out. Well, here we have another category of body language, which is universalizing one aspect of body language and saying it applies to all circumstances and contexts. Now, there is good scientific study behind why we might cross our arms, and one of them is that as human beings, we are the only mammal that actually exposes our organs. So when we feel stressed, when we feel defensive, we cover them up, and one of the ways we cover them up is by crossing our hands. However, there are other explanations to explain that body language as well. Say, for example, that you're in a room, and that room is freezing, just how I like it. But very often what I'll see in front of me are people crossing their hands. Their intent is not to be defensive. Their intent is to warm their body because they feel cold. Then there are others who just find that posture comfortable because it's a habit and something they've grown used to. I was working with a group of police officers recently who explained to me because of the gear that they wear, that folding the arms or crossing the arms is actually very comfortable because of the burden off the waistband that they wear. So there's another explanation. So when you see someone who's crossed their hands, yes, an explanation could be that they have become defensive, but we also have to listen to the context and what's happening around that movement to really give us the true meaning. The next common body language myth concerns eye direction and lying. There is a myth propagated around the internet that says if you look to the right, you're telling the truth. If you look to the left, you're telling lies. And it's based apparently in neurolinguistic programming, NLP. The problem is this research has been totally debunked, and the other problem is that NLP and its founders never really said that in the first place. There is no research that shows that looking in one direction or looking in another points to the person lying. The fourth myth is a close cousin of the third myth, and that is that liars will keep greater eye contact with you to cover up the fact that they're lying, or the opposite is liars can't make eye contact because they're nervous about their lies. Again, I wish that lying would be so easy to detect, but unfortunately it is not. And indeed, research has shown that there is no correlation between the amount of eye contact and the person lying or not lying. Before we move to the final three myths, I want to invite you to subscribe to the YouTube channel, to press the bell. You're going to be notified of new videos which come out every week on different topics of body language and emotional intelligence, which really aim at helping people grow in their ability to manage their emotions so that they are able to show up with greater confidence both at work and at home. The fifth myth is that one signal that a person does points to a lie. So say, for example, if a person starts scratching their nose, or if a person starts fidgeting. There are other examples as well, but all of them, they say, point to the fact, the person is lying. And here's a good rule of thumb when it comes to actually trying to detect lies, and it's this: there is no such thing as a Pinocchio's nose. There's no such thing as one thing that points to a lie. What we know is that if you want to become more scientifically accurate in really guessing if a person is lying or not, you have to take in the total context, and you can't just single out one thing that points to the lie. The sixth myth when it comes to body language is that all body language is culturally based and there are no universals. Now, it's very interesting that indeed much of body language is culturally determined. In fact, one of the problems that people get themselves into is taking something that is culturally based and applying it universally. So a good example of this are emblems. Emblems are gestures that we use which replace words. So say, for example, if I do this, in the Western world, this means all good, A-okay. But in other cultures, this actually is an offensive gesture. So therefore, you can't apply something that has meaning in one culture to another. However, there are a set of body language gestures which are facial expressions and facial emotions which have been proved to be universal. This revolves around the work of Dr. Paul Ekman, who studied emotion in the human face, and he found that there are 7 universal emotions which can be found in every culture, in every gender, and in every age. Those 7 universal emotions are surprise, fear, anger, contempt, disgust, happiness, and sadness. And the final body language myth is that if you look at the direction a person's feet are pointed to, it will give you a signal to their intent. And so, for example, this commonly comes up by saying if you're having a conversation with a person and their feet are turned towards the door, that means that they are not comfortable in the conversation or that they want to leave the conversation. The problem with a body language fact like this is that there's no solid research behind it. All we're left is with someone's observations. Well, I have found this to be true, and maybe you have. But if we're going to express something with certainty, there has to be some scientific research behind it. And so therefore, when it comes to body language, I invite you to be curious and to ask questions. I invite you to ask the deeper questions. What is the research behind this fact? What does the research point to? Because when you ask those deeper questions, you'll be able to come to a much more solid basis and grounding yourself on what's accurate about body language and avoiding the myths. I promised at the beginning of the video that I would point you to a link, which is a free emotional intelligence course that I developed. There you'll find information about what emotional intelligence is and offer you different practical tools that you can begin here and today to grow your emotional intelligence. You'll find that link below. And if you've enjoyed this episode, I invite you to visit the next, which are body language mistakes that you want to avoid in your next job interview.